The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Session 1, Unit 10, Lesson 4. On the eastern shore of the Hudson, by the wide Tappan Zee, there is a little valley among high hills. It's one of the quietest places in the whole world. A small brook glides through it, murmuring to lull one to sleep. The whistle of a quail or tapping of a woodpecker is almost the only sound that ever breaks the unchanging silence. The quiet glen has long been known by the name of Sleepy Hollow. A drowsy, dreamy feeling seems to hang over the land. One can almost feel it in the air. If I should wish to get away from world and its troubles, I know no place better than this little valley. There is, however, something strange about this place. Stars shoot and meteors glare more across the valley than in any other part of the country. The people walk around as though they are in a dream. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs. The whole neighborhood abounds with tales and superstitions, but the most famous figure in Sleepy Hollow is the apparition of a man on horseback. Some say it's the ghost of a Haitian soldier, whose head was carried away by a cannonball in a battle during the Revolutionary War. The folk of the enchanted region believe that the soldier's body was buried in their churchyard. Every night, they say, his ghost rides forth to the scene of the battle in search of his head. Sometimes the wind rushes through the hollow like a midnight blast. They say it's because the soldier is late and in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak. That's what the Hollow folk tell of the strange and shadowy legend of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. The Hollow has a strange, dreamy effect on both its residents and the visitors to its valley. One such visitor is a school teacher named Ichabod Crane. The name Crane suited Ichabod well. He was tall but very thin. He had narrow shoulders and long arms and legs. His hands dangled a mile out of his sleeves. His feet might have served for shovels. His whole frame was most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, a long snipe nose, and large green glassy eyes. It looked like a weathercock perched upon his skinny neck to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding over a hill on a windy day, with his clothes fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for a scarecrow escaping from a cornfield. Ichabod Crane's schoolhouse was one large room, rudely made of logs. The windows were partly glazed and partly patched with pages from old copybooks. On a drowsy summer's day one could hear the pupils' voices practicing their lessons, murmuring like the hum of a beehive. When school hours were over, Ichabod played with the boys, especially if they had pretty sisters or mothers who were excellent cooks. Indeed, he had to keep on good terms with his pupils. He made a little money teaching. It would have hardly even been enough to feed him. Ichabod had a tremendous appetite. He could stuff himself like an anaconda, but it was the custom of the Hollow folk to give a room and meals to their children's schoolmaster. So he lived with each family a week at a time, going round the neighborhood with all of his belongings tied up in a cotton handkerchief. Ichabod was also the singing master of the neighborhood. He earned many bright shillings giving the young folks lessons. His greatest joy was to take the band of chosen singers to the front of the church on Sunday. Certain it is, his voice was heard far above all the rest. Even now there are peculiar quavers still to be heard in that church. On a quiet Sunday morning one can hear them half-mile away. They are said to be echoes from the nose of Ichabod Crane. Ichabod was also a kind of traveling gazette. He carried all the local gossip from house to house. He had read several books quite thorough, and he was also a perfect master of all the strange, dark stories of the country round. It was often his delight, after his school was dismissed in the afternoon, to stretch himself out by the little brook beside his schoolhouse. There he read books of frightening tales until evening. Then he made his way through the dark hills to the farmhouse where he was staying. As he walked, every sound of nature fluttered his excited imagination. The moan of the whippoorwill from the hill house, the hooting of the screech owl, and the sudden rustling of the birds in the thicket filled him with terror. Fireflies startled him. If a foolish beetle flew onto him, poor Ichabod practically died of fright. To drive away his fears, he sang psalm tunes, and the hollow folk often heard his melodies floating up from the road as they sat by their doors in the evening. Ichabod also enjoyed talking with the old Dutch wives as they sat spinning by their fires. He listened to their tales of ghosts and goblins, haunted fields, haunted brooks, haunted bridges, and haunted houses. He particularly enjoyed tales of the Headless Horseman, but for the pleasure of hearing these tales he paid the price of terrors of his walk home. What fearful shapes and shadows crossed his path in the dimness of a snowy night! How terrified he was that some rushing blast, howling among the trees, might be the Headless Horseman on one of his nightly rides. And that ends session 1.